The boundaries were clear at first. She was the stepmother, and he was the boy her husband brought into her life. Not quite a child, not yet a man. He moved through the house with quiet defiance, shoulders always tense, eyes darting like he never knew where he belonged. At first she kept her distance, trying to honor her role without overstepping. But distance isn't always a choice in a home thick with unspoken words. It started with small things. A meal left warming in the oven, when she knew he hadn't eaten. A hoodie of his folded and left on the staircase, even when it wasn't her responsibility. His silence became something she could read, not hostile, but weary, like he had forgotten how to ask for anything. There was a night he came home late, his face flushed from tears, his voice hoarse with words that refused to come out. She didn't ask questions. She just made tea, sat across from him, and listened to the way silence filled the space between them. It felt strangely like an invitation. He began opening up in shards, stories about his mother's absence, his father's volatility, the weight he carried that no one had ever tried to lift from his shoulders. She didn't comfort him like a mother, not exactly. She didn't hold him or coo over him. She sat with him, steady, listening, anchoring him without touching. That night changed how he looked at her, less like a stranger, more like someone real, someone who saw him. Time did what time always does. It blurred the lines. Conversations grew deeper. They'd sit on opposite ends of the couch, talking until midnight. He'd make her laugh in ways her husband never did. She found herself looking forward to his voice on the stairs, the soft way he'd say her name. There was nothing wrong in it, just two people filling the quiet spaces in each other's lives. But sometimes, she'd catch herself noticing too much. The way his hands looked when he brushed his hair back, the tension in his jaw when he was thinking too hard. She'd pull herself back, ashamed of how complicated it all felt. He wasn't hers, not really. And yet, in the absence of his mother, in the emotional distance of his father, she had become something to him, someone constant, someone safe. One night, while doing dishes, his hand grazed hers, and neither of them moved away. It was nothing, and it was everything. The air shifted. She could feel the question hanging there, not spoken, not even formed into thought, but heavy. In that moment, she knew that love doesn't always show up where it's supposed to. Sometimes, it slips through the cracks in a broken family, between roles you didn't ask for and feelings you can't explain. And the hardest part isn't what you feel, it's knowing where to put it. It began after the funeral. The house felt too quiet, the air too still, like grief had settled in the corners and refused to leave. Her husband had been distant for months, even before his mother passed. Now, with the loss heavy on everyone, he disappeared further into himself, working late, sleeping in the guest room some nights, drinking more. She didn't blame him, not entirely, but the silence he left behind was deafening. And in that silence, there was his son, 18, barely an adult, but carrying grief in a way that aged him overnight. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He just stopped speaking, walking through the house like a ghost wrapped in denim and resentment. They were two strangers under the same roof, both aching in different ways. The only sounds between them were the rituals of shared space, the clatter of dishes, the creak of floorboards, the hush of late-night TV reruns. She started leaving him notes. Not many words, just reminders, gentle nudges, a quote from a book once. One day, he responded. Not with a note, but with the dishes done without. Being asked, a blanket folded on the couch, a single cup of tea left for her, still warm. It wasn't much, but it meant he saw her. Grief, she realized, doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like two people trying to stay afloat in the same emotional wreckage. She found herself opening up more than she meant to. One night, while sorting through old boxes, She found a photo of his father from years ago, laughing, carefree. She showed it to him without thinking. He studied it like it was someone he used to know. "He doesn't smile like that anymore," he whispered. She didn't have a response, but the way he looked at her in that moment, like he needed someone to remember who his father used to be, made her feel like the only person left holding the pieces of their fractured family. Their connection grew slowly, stitched together with shared loneliness. They started watching late-night movies together, saying little, but choosing the same comedies, the same dramas. Their choices spoke what their mouths couldn't: comfort, longing, escape. One night he laughed at a scene and looked over at her, catching her smile. It wasn't a maternal smile. It was warm, yes, but vulnerable too, like she'd forgotten to protect herself from being seen. He didn't look away. She began to notice when he was having a hard day before he said a word. He did the same with her. That kind of closeness doesn't happen without cost. There were moments when he'd brush past her, and she'd feel it in her skin. Not desire, not exactly, but something electric, something neither of them named. They were both looking for someone to tether to feel less alone. It was emotional gravity, slow, inescapable, and nothing either of them planned. The rain had started hours before, soft at first, then steady, soaking the streets and casting everything in a dull gray. She had just finished folding the last of the laundry when she noticed his bedroom light still on. It was nearly midnight. She knocked gently and opened the door without waiting, something she usually avoided. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, head in his hands, the room dim except for the warm flicker of a small desk lamp. His back was hunched, shirt clinging slightly to his shoulders from a run he must have taken in the storm. He didn't look up right away. When he finally did, there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not anger, not sadness, something quieter, something resigned. She asked if he was okay, even though she already knew the answer. He shook his head once. "I feel like I don't belong anywhere," he said, voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. The weight of his words hung heavy between them. She stepped into the room without thinking, her instincts overtaking caution. She sat down beside him on the bed, not too close enough to be felt. She didn't try to fix it. She just let him speak. About how his father was never home anymore. About how the silence in the house was louder than any argument they'd ever had. About how tired he was of pretending to be fine. She shared something too, something she hadn't told anyone. About how she sometimes woke up feeling like a stranger in her own marriage. About how she missed being seen. About how she'd lost herself somewhere between compromise and routine. He listened the way no one else had in years. Not as a son, not even as a friend, just as someone who understood. There was no judgment in his gaze, just presence, just depth. The power flickered then, lights going out completely, leaving only the sound of rain and their breaths. She laughed nervously. He smiled. They sat in the dark, side by side, a quiet solidarity stretching between them. She felt his hand shift slightly closer, not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth. She didn't move away. A flash of lightning lit the room for just a second, illuminating his profile, wet hair falling over his forehead, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the floor. He looked impossibly young and infinitely tired. She reached for the blanket at the end of the bed and wrapped it around his shoulders. When her hands lingered just a moment too long, he looked up. Their eyes locked and time stilled, not in a romantic way, not in a forbidden way, but in the way two lost souls recognize each other in the dark. That night didn't end in anything scandalous, but something shifted, something irreversible. A line was crossed, not of touch, but of emotion. From that night on, they both knew. They could never return to what they were before.